Ballon d'Or was handed out, and Rodri of Manchester City came out as the winner. But we were led to believe for the longest time that there was a leaked list where Vinny was the winner, and then it was Rodri, and then Real Madrid boycotted the ceremony. But Chuck, the conversation, as it tends to happen after Ballon d'Or results, is that someone was robbed. Was Vinny robbed, and did Rodri deserve the Ballon d'Or?
Man, if rather let me ask you, throw back this question to you. What's the time period for consideration?
So it is I think from last season, or the season that was, then encompassing up to, I suppose, the international competitions that closed out the season officially at the end of June.
So nothing that's done this season counts?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Because for me, after having seen him start the season the way he did, that is Vinicius Jnr. because Rodri was injured. I thought to myself, this cements his place as one of the best. But we look at their body of work, man. And this is where me and you diverge, right? Because you say you're not a fan of individual awards because what's the criteria? How do you look at a midfielder? How do you look at a winger and then say this one had a better season? Because in the same list, you have Foden somewhere in 11. And I was like, which other 9 players are better than Foden with the season that he had with 21 goals and 12 assists or 20 and 20 or whatever those numbers are? But they were crazy. And then I see Harry Kane come up in front of him. I was like, Harry Kane's got a lot of goals, but for what? They didn't win nothing. So obviously there will be contention in terms of those prizes and the order of those things. But Rodri versus Vinicius, I was about to say, right, because the stat went about that if Rodri played for City, City won. But Rodri's been out for City and City are top of the table. So, I mean, do you want to see how much weight does that statement have? Because they're without Rodri, they're doing fine. They went without Haaland, they were doing fine. Without Kevin De Bruyne, they were doing fine. They're in a good system. Whereas someone like Vinny, I mean, yes, these guys are Champions League winners every other season. Played well in the La Liga, but I felt he was clearly the better guy on his team, and he did the domestic double. Whereas with Rodri, I think, yeah, man, it was same old in terms of what he does for City, but for what he did for Spain, maybe that gives him the notch. But for me, man, I think the guy who turned up more often, had game impacting efforts was Vinny, because how do you measure the impact of someone who controlled the game versus a goal? How do you measure the impact of someone who was controlling the tempo or someone who played one key pass versus someone who got a brace? Like, how do you measure those metrics? How do you... I don't know. So for me...
Right there, Chuck.
Yeah.
Right there when you ask the question, how do you... That's exactly why I'm not a fan of these awards, right? Because essentially, and what you're asking is the numbers should be the determining factor. I don't know if that's what I'm hearing you say. It shouldn't be like that because not everybody on the football pitch gets the same kind of opportunities or has the same responsibilities and therefore doesn't get the same kind of goals and assists. If you just bottle it down to that, it's always gonna be like the forwards, right?
Yeah.
And even right now in this moment, there's a feeling that as we sit here today, the best player in the world is Lamine Yamal, and he doesn't have the same number of goals as a Haaland, for example. So it can't just be goals and assists, even though that was the determining factor when those two aliens, Messi and Ronaldo, were going at it, right? Because all other things seemed equal. So then it was a question of, well, let's boil it down to their numbers because they do get numbers. This is what their game is. It was a more accurate comparison between the two players, but in actual fact, the award is not just between the forwards or any two players in the generation. It is across the field, right? And where Rodri is concerned, there aren't as many goals and assists, but Modric, once upon a time in 2018, won the Ballon d'Or with less numbers actually than Rodri, who was the DM. And you would think we are measuring impact, but we don't know, Chuck. This is why I'm for scrapping the awards, because we don't know. Like, do I think Vinny was robbed? No, I don't think Vinny was robbed. I think it's rare to have, quote unquote, a robbery where this award is concerned. It's opinion at the end of the day, right?
True.
You might feel Vinny, I might feel Rodri, or I might feel Vinny, you might feel Rodri, or you feel Foden is too far down the list. And I think about that and I'm thinking to myself, well, if Rodri wins because of what he did for City and Spain, who won the Euros, right? Spain defeated England in those Euros, but the caveat probably would be that Rodri was the player of that tournament and he was vital to what Spain did, but in the final, not as much. Whereas the team that they beat in the final was England. And who was one of their players? Foden. Did he have as good a tournament as Rodri? No, he didn't. But he was part of the team that went to the final. So if he then is the player who was awarded like the Premier League Player of the Season, in the same league that Rodri plays in the same team that Rodri plays in, should he be done in 11th, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't really make much sense. But then, Chuck, you have a situation where Modric won from a similar situation, where his Real Madrid team won the Champions League, and then his Croatia team went to the final. Did not win the final, but went to the final. But then you go back to that Real Madrid. Like, was he really the best player on that Real Madrid team?